The title of the exhibition, On Scene, initially comes from one of the earliest works that I made, which I think you can see behind me. And at this time I was, I think, concerned with what is visible and what is not visible, both to the camera and also in terms of the conflict in Ireland. And I think at the time when I was making this, I was concerned with ideas around surveillance. And I think now we're all very conscious of the amount of surveillance in the world. You know, we're surrounded by cameras in almost every building. And at this time, in the conflict in Ireland, I kind of felt a degree of paranoia because of this idea that one was being watched, that I knew that there was a kind of military surveillance presence, some of which you could see, but other aspects of it, especially on these kind of small border roads where I like to kind of investigate and photograph, I often had the feeling that I was being watched. So in one way, the photograph and the work attempts to kind of deal with that which you cannot see, therefore that which you really should not be able to photograph. So I had the idea that I could use language with the image in order to begin to speak about something that I couldn't actually photograph. The incident of Bloody Sunday that happened on the 30th of January 1972 was something that occurred when I was a 12-year-old boy, and became a kind of accidental witness to the start of this event, where I saw British soldiers shooting at innocent civilians, and 13 of these people were killed on that day. So for me, it became something that I suppose I didn't really feel the impact of it at the time. Obviously, it was a kind of shocking event, and people were kind of angry, and it had a massive impact on the place at that time and subsequently. But I think for me, what really kind of changed at that moment was, up until that point, I think as a child, I lived with the idea that in some ways the government was about truth, and the kind of organisation and kind of function of the state was about something other than lying to the people, really. And also, I kind of believed that what you read in the newspaper would essentially be true. That was my belief as a child.
The entrance wound, the kneecap, the exit wound.
Yeah, I mean, I was at home in my parents' house, and I was looking out of a window from the back of the house, which overlooked a kind of an open space beside a large block of flats, and there was also some kind of waste ground on the right hand side of this. And at that time in Derry, there was a riot almost every day of the week, and the riot happened in this place. So I guess because I was so young, and my parents were in some ways trying to protect not just me but my family from the worst of the violence. I wasn't permitted to be outside when there was a riot. So I remember at the time often feeling frustrated because I wanted to be outside looking at the riot, and because a lot of my friends were out throwing stones, and so I mean I was often as I say, kind of frustrated that I couldn't be out also, but I used to watch the riots from this back window of the house. It's strange to kind of explain it in that way, but it was almost kind of recreational kind of rioting, you know. And on this particular day, it was a large crowd of people, and the crowd started kind of surging, running backwards from the point at which they were throwing stones at the army. And I knew that this was different from the kind of normal kind of riot situation, because people were running back further than they normally would have, and they didn't stop running. People kept running, and I could see that the army were kind of advancing further into the bogside in these armoured vehicles, and people were, I could tell from the sound and the way people were running that people were panicking. And I remember seeing at the side of this waste ground, people were trying to climb over a wire fence because they didn't have enough time to run around it. And one of the army vehicles drove right through the fence, and people were thrown into the air. And then the vehicles just came to a halt almost in front of the window that I was watching from. And the 3 or 4 guys jumped out of the back of the vehicle, these paratroopers, and really just started shooting at the crowd, and started shooting at windows in the flats above also. So I think there were a couple of people shot in that small area where I saw these troops begin the shooting, and then there were 4 or 5 people shot within a few minutes of that also. So I mean, it was a kind of horrendous and really kind of abrupt and violent interruption in this day that appeared to be like any normal kind of day. So I mean, I was kind of trapped up the stairs for 5 minutes or so, trying to kind of hide down behind the window because the soldiers were shooting at some of the windows. And my father came upstairs and crawled into the room and managed to get me by the feet and drag me out of the room.
A foot in the back. Ankles pinned down. The cold, dark metal. The soft tissue.
I'm not sure that at the time it was traumatic for me, because I was kind of, I was 12 years old, and this was just another thing that happened. I mean, the previous 2 or 3 years of my life had been kind of full of this every day. There were kind of riots every day. People were injured, rubber bullets were fired, tear gas every day of the week. So this was just like another kind of day in some ways of rioting, except that the outcome of it was obviously, much more fundamentally tragic, and it would turn out to be a day that would completely change the course of events after that, because I think it's been kind of acknowledged that what happened on Bloody Sunday proved to be one of the biggest recruiting exercises for the IRA, because people were so incensed and angry that this thing had happened, and then that it had been covered up and denied. So I think if I had been maybe 4 or 5 years older, I might have had a different response. I might have got involved in a more violent response. A friend of mine's at school, his brother, who was 17 at the time, became involved with the IRA after Bloody Sunday, and within a year was arrested and spent the next 20 years in prison. But his friend, a guy called Hugh Gilmore, who was also 17, was one of the people who was shot on Bloody Sunday. So he immediately joined the IRA and wanted to fight the British.